And I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues in government, Barbara Lee and Mike Honda. Yes, give them a round of applause. Barbara is someone, and I know you all know that she's an advocate for the AAPI community. I know that you all know she's an advocate for all of us. But I have the privilege of getting to see and witness how Barbara Lee works on the floor of the House, in meetings, sitting at tables during meetings where sometimes there is no woman of color present, that there is sometimes not even an AAPI member present. And I have seen Barbara Lee fight tooth and nail for the AAPI community, and I never want to miss an opportunity to thank her in public. She is one of the few women of color in our House Democratic leadership, and it's important for all of our communities that she continues to be there and that she is able to be as effective as she has been and will continue to be, I'm sure. You know, one time we had to, Barbara makes fun of me when I tell this story, but you know, we needed someone to, I forgot, maybe it was like to do a speech on the floor. It was late at night, 8, 9 p.m. No member wanted to do it. Everyone wanted to go home. And so I was joking to another member. I said, just ask Barbara Lee to do it. Barbara Lee works extra hard. Barbara Lee's always working after hours. But that's really just one example of how hard Barbara fights for our community. To Mike Honda, when I first got to Congress, Mike Honda called me, and I had never even really met him or spoken to him. I only knew of his name, and I saw his picture before. But before I got elected to Congress, Mike Honda was one of the first people to reach out to me. And he called to give me advice. He called to give me support. And even though we aren't serving together day to day in the halls of Congress right now, Mike Honda has done something for our community that is so valuable, and he continues to do this. He has strengthened and helped us establish a network of AAPI elected officials, of community leaders, partners, allies, which is really needed, and it needs to be strengthened across the country. And it's because of Mike Honda and his legacy that he's left in Congress that really lays that blueprint for us every single day as we're working on various issues. And I have tremendous, tremendous shoes to fit. You're making me nervous, Mike. Tremendous shoes to fill with Mike Honda, because I followed him as one of the DNC vice chairs. And when I was thinking about running, he was one of the folks, it's like, you just have to do it. I was like, I don't know if I can do it. You just have to. Like, he left no choice. And then also now as one of the co-chairs of the Hepatitis Caucus. So huge shoes to fill, but Mike, thanks for leading us in the right direction always and for being there for all of us. So I've spent this week in California, much of it in San Francisco, and it's been really meaningful. We took the tour to Alcatraz and across the way saw Angel Island. And for the first time, I visited the Chinese Museum downtown where I met Selena. And it was really meaningful to me as a Chinese American. My husband's Korean American, and we're there with our children, clapping for the Korean part of my speech. All the things I've said. That's why they love you. And so, you know, I don't get into too much politics with my boys, right? They're not, I mean, they don't grow up in the typical household. One son thought that only women could run for office, you know.
Yeah, that's all right.
The other son keeps a running tally of members who are supporting impeachment of this president. It's not a typical household.
Impeach Trump!
So I try not to politicize things or issues too much for them. But they know that I went to the border. They have seen and heard stories on TV and in the media about family separation that has been happening. And so it was really a stark contrast to me bringing them to this museum and talking about Angel Island and seeing the history of my ancestors whose immigrants were detained for days, weeks, months, and even years and families were separated, and me trying to not very successfully explaining to my son that this was just a piece of our history, our very unfair and discriminatory history, while at the same time explaining that this is literally happening right under our nose in our communities, in our country, under this administration as we speak. And so it's just a stark reminder of me, like Evan said, of why I got involved with the DNC. I wasn't necessarily interested in Democratic or party politics before. I had never been involved in party politics. But I really felt like it was important that the Asian community had a voice in the Democratic National Committee. And there are so many times when I'm in rooms in Congress or where decisions are being made, and there is no woman of color, there is no AAPI at the table. And that happens a lot. You know, when I first started in the New York State Assembly, I was in the State House, and I was the only Asian elected official there. I couldn't have my own Asian caucus, obviously, it's just me. So my colleagues were generous enough to invite me to join the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian caucus, our version of the Tri-Caucus. And in Congress right now, if you look at the number of members of the Tri-Caucus, the numbers constitute a majority of the Democratic caucus in Congress. And so I say this because it's important for us to remember the importance of building and maintaining and strengthening these coalitions. The AAPI community has benefited so much from the struggles and the achievements of the Black and Latinx community. And it's really important, especially in this tough time during this Trump administration, that we continue to stick together. And so it's been really exciting I've been in Congress for about 6 years now and working on lots of issues. One of my dream issues is to one day have an AAPI museum in Washington, D.C. We have watched the success of the African American Museum on the Mall, watching people, not just from the African American community, but young people and folks from all over the world come learn about contributions to our American history that we didn't necessarily learn about when we were kids growing up in this country. And so that's one of my dreams one day. We have a lot of work to do in Congress and around the country. We've won battles and we will continue to fight and win battles. The census is something that is really important to all of our shared communities. We know that our communities worked together hand in hand and were able to prohibit the inclusion of a racist citizenship question in the upcoming census. And that was literally our communities and our elected officials and advocates working together hand in hand. And so that is one example of how we have fought and we have achieved successes. And we have to continue to do this, whether it's our families at the border, whether it's for our transgender folks serving patriotically in the military, whether it's making sure that the Senate is actually passing legislation that the House has passed. Under Speaker Pelosi, we have passed over 200 pieces of legislation this year. The Senate, under Mitch McConnell, has only passed, I think, about 3 pieces of legislation. So guess who has more work to get done? So whether it's gun safety legislation, whether it's the Equality Act, whether it's equal pay, whether I can go on, Dreamers, TPS, there are so many issues that we need the Senate to do their job. And so our fight is not over. We have to continue to fight to make sure that we are truly working hard to protect so many American families right now who feel like their lives are at risk, who feel like no one is speaking up for them. And so that's my day job. And I want you to feel free to reach out to me, even though I represent a district in Queens. If you're ever in Washington, D.C. or in New York, feel free to reach out to me, or if you have ideas or criticisms of Congress even, I mean, maybe you do. Don't hesitate to reach out. But, you know, as we talk about the 2020 elections, the DNC just met here the last few days, right here in San Francisco. And like Assemblymember Lowe and I have talked about often, the importance of having the AAPI voice at the table. And part of the reason I got involved, well, because my Conda told me to, but also because I noticed leading up to the 2016 election and during the election that the Democratic Party needed to do a better job at reaching out to so many communities, including the AAPI community. And worse yet, I noticed that the Republicans were kind of doing a good job. And even though they might be planning long-term, it's definitely on their radar to make sure that our community's concerns are listened to by their party, even though they're promoting policies and legislation that directly hurt people in our community. After the first debate, actually the first presidential Democratic candidates debate, the Republicans even had a response, a national response in English, in Spanish, and in Mandarin Chinese. And so they are definitely, even if it's a long-term plan, our community is definitely on their radar, and our party needs to make sure that we are listening to them as well. And I remember my first trip as a vice chair for the DNC was to Georgia, and this was when Jon Ossoff was running. Remember, Chantel knows. It was the first federal election after Trump got elected. And I went down there and I saw this amazing coalition being built. The DNC for the first time hired organizers that came from those communities, looked like the folks in their neighborhoods and spoke their languages instead of just sending people with fancy resumes to local communities. And so even though Jon Ossoff lost that race, 8,000 voters, new voters, were registered collectively because of that one race. And 2 years later, you all know, Lucy McBath won that same seat.
Yes.
So this is the importance of coalition building and laying a foundation for all of our communities as we work together. Stacey Abrams, as you know, was our nominee. And even though she didn't make it yet, she tripled the turnout of the AAPI community in Georgia. And so we had gone down another time, and this was in Georgia. This is just one example of how important it is to build these types of coalition. She had souls to the polls, which is not the traditional notion of what you think souls to the polls. This was in the Korean churches, SEOULS. So that campaign, it just sticks out in my mind because it's a perfect example of what we need to replicate across the country, even in areas where there might not be a large API or communities of colors. It's important to make sure that people know we are listening to them and hearing their concerns. We come from California and New York, so it's easy for us to overlook that. But when we were in places like Georgia, and we've even been to like Arkansas and Iowa, you know, we have Democrats who say that they've supported Democrats their whole life, but that Democrats had never knocked on their door or never called them. And so 2016, mark my words, one day, hopefully soon, we will see that this president is the best thing that has ever happened to our party. Because of his victory and because of the hateful rhetoric and actions that are coming out of this administration every single day, we are banding together, we are uniting like we haven't done before, and we are not taking anything for granted anymore. And so I just wanted to, really thank all of you. Most of us are new friends, and I really appreciate you guys coming out on a Sunday afternoon to spend time with me and supporting our re-election. I'm so thankful. Jason and Evan tell me all the time so much about the amazing work that you are all doing in your neighborhoods. And we in New York and across the country learn a lot from your efforts and your successes as well. Danielle's one of them. She comes to New York and literally tells us what to do and how to strengthen these coalitions. But thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you again to my colleagues, Barbara and Mike, for all that you do and for taking the time to come out here today. Thanks so much.